Hello, Nesco Nation, and welcome to another episode of Higher Side Chats. I'm Kelly Hatgas, and I'm excited today to have a very special guest with us. Though she probably wouldn't explain this way out of an abundance of humility, Kelly Hatgas has a very important job working the underserved families in the Cleveland Municipal School District as a wraparound site coordinator. She also has the difficult task of being married to me. Welcome, Kelly. Thanks for being here.
Thank you. And it's not that difficult being married to you.
Oh, thanks. That's nice.
Thought I'd throw you a compliment in there.
So why don't you tell Nesco Nation a little about yourself?
Sure. So in addition to being the charming wife to a charming husband, I'm also a mom. I have two beautiful boys. One who is school aged and starting third grade, and another one who just started preschool in the pandemic times. That's kind of me in a nutshell.
So why don't you explain to folks, I mean, I mentioned you're a wraparound coordinator. Most people don't know what that means. So can you explain a little bit about what your job is, but also where you work? Because who you work for and where you work are two separate entities as well. If you want to explain that a little bit.
Yeah, this is also true. So I actually work for a community development corporation that serves residents in the low income and working class neighborhood on the near west side of Cleveland. And as you said, I'm the wraparound coordinator. So it's a school-based position. So I work in a school that's located in that neighborhood. And I wear a lot of hats in my job. I think it's fair to say, I think my number one priority as a wraparound coordinator is to support families and students by working to eliminate what I would refer to as non-academic barriers to academic success. So that can look a lot of different ways, but we know that kids come to school ready to learn when they have food at home, or they have proper medical care, or their family has the income to be able to afford their monthly utility bills and their rent, things like that. So really making sure that the family units are as stable as possible means that our kids are going to come to school ready to learn and won't have those barriers and that kind of emotional baggage, I guess, bringing with them to school that would keep them from being able to learn all the awesome, important things you learn at school. Another kind of key priority that I have is really trying to connect with the community to bring those resources into our families and into our schools and be that point person. So I am the point person for all of our community partners at the school as well. And they bring a lot to the table in terms of support. And, it might not just be connecting families with this local food pantry or this church, but this organization that provides an after-school program that really focuses on social and emotional learning so that we can connect our kids to resources like that in an out-of-school environment. Then speaking of out of school, I'm in charge of coordinating all of our enrichment and out of school time programming. So again, working with our community partners to bring that to the table for our students, which of course is going to look very different this year in a remote environment. And then last but not least, just as important as the previous three, is really trying to engage our families in the school community. So what opportunities do we have to bring our families to the table for literacy nights or other family engagement nights? One of the big programs at our school, which I'm super bummed about this year because of COVID ruining it all, is Bring a Grown Up to School Day, where all the families come and spend a morning with their kids It's right around the holidays, so it's a really fun day and a great way to showcase all the things that we're doing. And, kids get excited when their parents can come with them to school. So, that's just a little bit of what my role entails.
Great. Thanks. So how did that all change? You already kind of mentioned, you already mentioned COVID. How did the nature of your job change when the school that you work with or you work at transitioned to remote learning?
Well, gosh, I don't think that on March 13th, when we got the announcement that schools were going to close, that it was going to be for as long as it was. That was kind of the first signal, at least here in Ohio, that kind of like, oh, this virus is kind of a big deal. But we also kind of, I think we're approaching it as maybe an opportunity for an extended spring break. It was right around spring break time. Oh, it's not going to be that big of a deal. We'll be back to school in April. April turned into May. May turned into August, September, and here we all are. And so, the nature of my job shifted in that, at least immediately, I wasn't focused on planning family engagement events. I wasn't focused on coordinating our after school programs. I was super bummed that all the plans that I'd already made were falling through, and trying to figure out how to redirect our partners to support families and students, but also trying to kind of really reinvent the way that we were connecting with our families. In a school, parents are coming, they're picking their kids up, they're dropping them off, we're waving at them, we're handing them flyers, we're talking word of mouth. And so kind of a lot of that stopped, not to mention the fact that, the realities of the COVID closure and at least the lockdown here in Ohio, it wasn't kind to our most vulnerable populations, for sure. Families that were already struggling with food insecurity or making monthly rent payments or things like of that nature, were fighting an uphill battle when they suddenly couldn't go to work because their work was shut down, and or they were essential workers and yet suddenly their kids were at home. So I know that's a strain that's not unique to low-income families. I know we were feeling the strains of that as well in the spring. And so I think, collectively, we were, I think, really as a country during a lot of that shutdown, like having a moment as parents, working parents, and, small business owners or anything like that, really having a moment of thinking like, how long is this going to last and what's it going to be like?
Right. So what are you mentioned some of them already, but what are some of the challenges you faced as a parent and an employee, but as a parent, when everyone was home?
Yeah. So we all got to experience that fun, didn't we?
That we did.
I think some of the biggest challenges, we can laugh about the sudden increase in the volume of food that our family was consuming during the lockdown, and during this extended summer. But I do think that it became a real challenge because, number one, my work in particular was so based on serving and reacting to the needs of the community. And so to suddenly be disconnected from that community was really a challenge. I had our school, just to give you some context, is around 500 students enrolled. And so, there, for one person to have to keep up with 500 kids is not an easy task. But also too, trying to think about, how do I reach out to the families that I think are probably struggling the most? Who have I talked to before in the last, 4 or 5 months of the school year, that would give me a clue kind of, so that I started to kind of build out my contact list that way and reach out to those families. But, as I'm calling those families, my Wi-Fi signal is dying because we're all trying to access our tablets, and our then 3-year-old was barging in the room and wanting to show me the Legos that he was playing with. And I'm on the phone with a parent who is crying to me because this is the weight of the situation was so heavy. And so, I think there were a lot of challenges. I could go on for a long time. But I think for me, the biggest thing was really trying to be able to, and really, frankly, I'm still working on it, to separate. I have always been a person who's slightly more sensitive. So it was, and I know that you have frequently reminded me in the past to find ways to help me leave my work at work. So what do you do when your work is suddenly at your dining room table, across the table from your husband who's trying to get his work done, and your second grader who's trying to get his math work done, and your preschooler who doesn't have any work to do and wants you to do everything with him. So, I think that was and will continue to be the thing that I think about when I think about the quarantine of 2020.
Absolutely. Not easy for anybody. Also, those times feel like 4 years ago.
I know. I frequently use the phrase, and this was pre-COVID, in the before times, I would frequently use the phrase, gosh, I feel like I've lived 1,000 lives since whatever. And that has been so true for the year of 2020. I really do literally feel like I've lived 1,000 lives every single day since
Absolutely.
March.
It's,
So
time has no meaning in
right.
this. In the year 2020. So we all survived a semester at home, but a new one starting. So, and for many families, ours included, the remote learning is what's happening. As part of that is, and it's the remote learning, which keeps the children occupied for a time, but not all the time. And, we've got a lot of parents, obviously, you included, working from home. And sometimes you just need something else for the kid to do while you're still trying to get work done. So have you come across, do you have any resources that parents of families, can utilize to help with, education, or just projects, or just get out of my hair for 10 minutes? What kind of stuff do you have that we can share with the rest of Nesco Nation?
Sure. So I would preface all of this to say that I am deeply steeped in the education adjacent community. And so I would say that the fall is going to look way different than the spring. Schools were just not prepared to pivot in March. And so they have really, I think, used a lot of this time since the school closure, getting kind of trying to survive through the spring and teach what they could, the way that they could so quickly, and stuff like that. I've heard several superintendents here, even in the Cleveland area, say time and time again, the fall is not going to look like the spring. So I think that bodes well for us working parents and folks that are working from home, because I think that the days will be structured, which is something that really, frankly, I know that I struggled with in the spring, was suddenly having to build that structure myself. And so, let's all give ourselves a collective pat on the back. We figured it out somehow, some way. We got through it. And so our teachers, I think we're really going to be able to rely more on the teachers in terms of providing a lot of those supplemental resources and things that suddenly we were so thirsty for in the spring. I do, however, think that some of the things and the resources that I would really suggest to point parents to are things that are not necessarily parts of school curriculum, maybe might address more of the social emotional side of things. This has been a big transition for us as parents. Let's not forget how much of a transition it is for our young people in our lives. They were, for as frustrated as we were for suddenly having to work at home and having our routines altered, it was their routines that were also altered. And here we are heading back into this kind of unknown thing with the fall learning and not knowing, maybe we're going to hybrid, maybe we're starting in hybrid, maybe we go all to remote, like whatever all that uncertainty is. So really trying to think about some resources that you might be able to use to help not only get your kids out of your hair for a few minutes so you can wrap up that Zoom call, but also to kind of really amp up their emotional IQ so that they can handle the stress that they're feeling during their days. Because we're older, we can kind of, not that I'm always so great about handling my own stress, but I'd like to think that I'm slightly more regulated than our third grade students. So, so, in terms of things like that, I also know the importance of physical activity, which kids are lacking. I'm lacking it. I'm realizing that before, when I was at my school building, I was up and down stairs and down that super long, crazy hallway 1,500 times. And now I walk downstairs fully dressed and plot myself at my dining room table. And that's where I sit for 8 full hours. So think about that for your kids too. So one resource I think that was really great, helped us in the spring, was YouTube, good old YouTube. There's actually a channel on YouTube called Cosmic Yoga. And so that is something that our kids have really enjoyed. They have different themed yoga sessions. They're short, they're like 15 minutes. But they focus on, the breathing techniques, the calming techniques, things like that, but also all of that important stretching and, getting your bodies up and moving. So brain breaks, I think, are going to be a really key piece. So, finding short little activities that you can send your kids off to do, or to do that are not, even staring at a computer screen are sometimes helpful too. So like the Cosmic Yoga is awesome. I also have apps on my phone. So I have something called Calm. And so that has lots of guided meditations, but they also have them for kids. So that would be another good idea. Our kids really like to dance. So popping on a Just Dance or just putting on some music, and letting them move around, even if it's only for 5-10 minutes in between their math lesson and their reading lesson, I think could be really beneficial. And, as for other activities, I feel like, what was really unfortunate in the spring is that none of us knew anything, right? And so now there's like all of these resources out there. So really, I don't want to drive anybody crazy by going, oh, go to Pinterest and find all the cute little snack activities that you can do with your kids, because you're not going to do that. You're going to feel overwhelmed and it's a waste. So, but keep in mind, kids are still going to need to snack. So think about, one activity, and I had the pleasure during the spring of working with my development corporation to work on some family resources, some kind of at-home learning resources. And so we did a lot of research, a lot of web research on activities that kids could do that required technology. But of course, because we serve low-income families, we had to keep it low-tech as well in case they didn't have a computer. And the only way that they were ever accessing the internet was through mom's, smartphone. And so, things that you didn't need to print or stuff like that. And there's a ton of activities on there, and fun things that you can find and research as well. I mean, I know you asked for a concise list of resources, and really, like, the world is your oyster, people. It's out there. You just have to go and find it. A couple of other things that I know that could be fun for you to work on with your kids. So not necessarily something that, I guess it depends on the age of your kid, that you wouldn't necessarily set them to work on. Now that we're kind of in this still in a lot of ways, we're missing birthdays, we're missing important time with our families and things like that in a lot of cases. So maybe even introducing them to an app like Canva if they're if you have an older kid, to do some design of some different, birthday cards or announcements or things like that you could download as digital files and send to families. That could be really fun. Our kids really love Chrome Music Lab. So I can literally open up our Chromebook and get them on. I mean, I don't need to even help them find it anymore. They can find it themselves. And, that's not a great activity if you're on a Zoom call, but if they're in another room, it's a great activity. They can design their own, write their own musical numbers, use lots of different instruments, explore shapes and sounds. It's super cool. So those are some other things, to kind of point them towards as well.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I mean, it's a great point about how the school year might be different this year. Yeah, this fall than the spring, where in the spring the learning was led by the parents mostly.
In a lot of cases it was. I know that was our experience was, and our teachers worked hard and pivoted for our son, I know. But even then it was, a list of assignments that they had to complete over the course of a week, sprinkled with a few times where they could log in and actually see a real person throughout the week. And so that left us to say, hey, did you finish all of your math, reading, social studies? Like, where are you? We had to budget, so he didn't do it all on Monday, and then we were stuck Tuesday through Friday with something, trying to fill his time. And, it was really a big challenge. I think a lot of school districts have been working really hard to make it feel more like traditional school, even though we're in this remote or even in a hybrid phase. And so there will be, I anticipate, lots of resources and things that teachers will point you to that will be related to their curriculum, which is really great. So just think about, checking in with your kids too, and spending, we need brain breaks. We just don't call them that.
Right.
And so taking some time, when you might normally log off of your work for a minute and scroll through Facebook on your phone, go upstairs and see what your child might be up to, or check in with them. And then, my last kind of piece of advice might be to just look for any kind of like behavioral changes that you might see in your kids, just as signs that they might be stressed out or feeling anxious. I know that was something that we observed in our son, was suddenly everything was such a big deal, and even the small stuff. And actually, frankly, if I'm being 100% honest, I was also feeling the exact same way. And so, then finding ways for him to decompress, for you to decompress, for you guys to decompress as a family, and then not being afraid to call in talk to talk to the teachers about it. A lot of schools have school-based mental health resources available. So, there's no shame in bringing in an expert when something's going on, and maybe they just need someone to talk to about how they're feeling. So, that would just be another thing. And I guess, I know I keep going, and another thing. But I think the other part of that too is making sure that you're filling your own bucket as the parent and as the grown-up. And so taking and doing whatever you need to do to get up and stretch, not just the brain breaks, but how are you really structuring your time to rejuvenate so that you can handle a lot of anything that will come up during remote learning. I can't predict what those things are, but I know they're coming.
No, those are all really great points. And I really thank you for coming on and sharing those with everybody. I think anyone with school-age kids can take even just a nugget of the wisdom that you imparted on everyone today to help out. So thanks again for joining us today.
Sure, thanks for having me. It was a pleasure.
Nesco Nation, if you have any other topics you'd like to cover or interesting people that you think would be a good fit for our podcast, go ahead and email us at highersidechats@nescoresource.com and let us know. Also, the audio version of Higherside Chats is now available on most of the popular podcast apps. So Apple, Google, Overcast, Stitcher, Spotify. You can go ahead and grab those. It'd be great if you would subscribe and give us a 5-star rating and let other people know that you can grab them there. Or, of course, they're on all of them are on our YouTube as well. Please subscribe and give us a like there as well. Other than that, thanks again for checking us out, and we will see you next time. Bye.